Welcome back to the Mouse and Men podcast. I am Chris Murphy. Along with me is my co-host and friend, Bradley Minigan. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Chris?
Man, I'm doing good. We are halfway through all the pavilions at the World Showcase. This week, we are hanging out at the American Adventure Pavilion. For some reason, they throw in the word adventure there, and I like it because it felt like an adventure with all the drinking that we were doing that day.
Right.
But it's good to be going around the World Showcase Lagoon again this week at American Pavilion.
It sure is. Be sure to follow us on social media as well to get some more pictures and videos from our adventures in not only the American Pavilion, but the rest of EPCOT as well over at the Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also find us on YouTube as well, where we post videos, video episodes of our podcast, all sorts of fun stuff on there. But it's been an adventure halfway around World Showcase in EPCOT. We're hitting that apex and kind of going around the circle, like you said, halfway there. I can't wait to talk more about the American Adventure Pavilion.
You know what's funny is when you look at all of EPCOT on a map, it is so symmetrical looking from space or from a distance looking over everything. And it is nice that if you've got six countries that make up the World Showcase, that the American Adventure is dead center. If you look right across the World Showcase Lagoon, you can see the big EPCOT spaceship Earth dome there. And so it's a nice representation to see how far you are around the lagoon there. But we realized when we got to the American Adventure Pavilion that although we were only halfway through all of the searching and looking and drinking and everything that we were doing that day, we were already starting to run out of time because there's just so much to pack in to doing a day around the World Showcase Lagoon. It was quite an adventure in and of itself, just trying to make it through all 11 pavilions.
Right. You know, America being the 6th of the 11, you're right. It is right there in the middle. Cool view. Also, much like Main Street USA makes the castle look bigger, just with forced perspective. They do the same thing with the American Pavilion. They build it exaggerated so that when you're standing across World Showcase Lagoon, the little lake there in the middle, the American Pavilion looks just large, not necessarily intimidating, but very stately.
Yeah.
It's built in the colonial style architecture, so looking like you're stepping back into early United States history. It's very open, kind of a courtyard area with a clamshell, bandshell up against the water, and then you're looking at the American Pavilion building right there.
Yeah. And again, much like all of the countries around the World Showcase Lagoon, it's a representation of the country, not necessarily an exact replica of what you would walk into in any of those countries. And so that colonial architecture, people dressed up in Revolutionary War outfits, it's certainly not something that you're going to see in 2020, but it's very representative of what it looked like 200-300 years ago.
Yeah, all these pavilions not only talk about what you experienced there, but the history, and so you have to show a snapshot of that country in some point in history, and the United States of America shortly after the Revolution, during the Revolution, is a pretty prominent part of our history, and when we were there, we tried a couple things. Unfortunately, we didn't try the funnel cake. We didn't have time.
Yeah.
We were getting enough calories just drinking, so I don't think we needed the additional funnel cake calories. But got a Yingling, which is the oldest brewery in America, and also a spiked root beer float, which I don't think you can get anymore. I think they actually quit selling it just days after we were there last year.
I'm glad that we were able to try that because it was delicious. Root beer has always been one of my favorite sodas, and so to add the alcohol in there, even though it was vodka, I mean the vanilla vodka that they put into it was a perfect complement to it. But I think that, as you were saying a little bit earlier, not necessarily the most American of spirits.
Now that I think about it, I take it back a little bit. With America being the melting pot, we take the best parts of every culture, kind of mix it together and create something new. So taking some root beer, some vanilla ice cream, and a little vodka made everything just perfect.
Yeah, and maybe if they put something that was more typically American, like a whiskey, it probably would have been good, but maybe have packed that punch because whiskey's got so much of a flavor. It hits you over the head sometimes, depending on what kind of whiskey that you get, or bourbon, or whatever it may be.
It may hit you over the head depending on how much you drink too.
Right. So to have a vodka that kind of takes on the flavor of what you put with it is probably a good combo. Yeah. But yeah, rest in peace, spiked root beer.
Right. Well, there are a couple other things to do there too that we didn't get to. We did go through there. There's a little museum just of art and artifacts depicting American history, which is called the American Heritage Gallery. There's also the American Adventure, a 30-minute film with some animatronics, audio animatronics, and just kind of the history of America. And then, Chris, I think you had a pretty cool in quotes experience with the Voices of Liberty, who are some a cappella singers that come in to sing folk songs in the lobby of the American Adventure Pavilion.
Yeah.
But those are just a few things to do there in the American Pavilion.
You said the name of the a cappella group were the Voices of Liberty?
Yep.
Yeah. So when you and I were there, we got our beverages as we do at every pavilion. We were walking around enjoying the flavors of that, but also taking some pictures, taking some video. And if you go into the pavilion, there is this beautiful ceiling inside of the American Adventure Pavilion. And I wanted to get a really cool video of it and kind of pan from that and go all the way to a really nice floor that kind of centers the American Adventure Pavilion. And so as I was doing that, I noticed that there were crowds gathering, but I was like, there's crowds everywhere at EPCOT, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But as soon as I pushed record and started filming that, everybody started clapping. And here I was in the middle of this crowd, people clapping, and I thought, well, I must be a pretty good videographer, because even just the motions that I'm doing with the camera, people were just, yes, very, very good, very good. But then I looked, and the Voices of Liberty were coming from different sections of the pavilion to all gather in the center to perform a cappella music. And here I was standing in and amongst them and realized they weren't clapping for me. They were clapping for the performers that were about to go. So I needed to get out of the way. So that was quite an interesting little embarrassing moment.
Oh no. Well, it's a good thing we'd been drinking and you weren't going to be too embarrassed.
That's true. Yeah. You couldn't get me too tied down to embarrassment after I had all that alcohol by that point.
Well, it's a pavilion where I feel like I didn't learn as much because, I mean, we grew up learning U.S. history and hearing about colonial times and the American Revolution, but it does feel patriotic. When we were there, they were renovating the old restaurant called Liberty Inn. It is now the Regal Eagle, which is all about...
It's a great name, by the way.
Right?
Yeah.
The Regal Eagle's all about barbecue and beer, which I gotta admit, you can't get more American than that.
That's true.
So I think we need to get back and try some food at the Regal Eagle. We just need to get back and eat our way around EPCOT. Another around the world challenge that we've got for you.
Yeah, we up to this point at the American Pavilion had successfully done the drinking around the world challenge. And I think we had a pretty successful day all in all. With everything that we did. But that is one thing that I wish that we could have done, was spend more time in each of the pavilions and had more food. We did have some snacks along the way, but because of the rushed experience that we were trying to do to get through all 11 pavilions, we didn't get to eat as much as I would have liked to. So I completely agree with you. One funny thing is, when we finally did get our drinks at the American Pavilion, we sat down and we were doing some video that you can check out over at YouTube. We were having some fun doing that. And all of these birds, they kind of look like pelicans, but I don't think, or not pelicans, flamingos, but I don't think that they were flamingos. But they just kept, like, you could tell they're there because people dropped food and that's how they survive. But it was funny. There was a little placard that was talking about, like, these trees or bushes that were planted there, and talked about the heroes from America, but there were no individuals there, just a bunch of birds eating all of our food. So they became the heroes because they were actually eating what I wanted to be eating.
Right. I'm sure they get fat on funnel cake, and which is good for us that we weren't getting fat on funnel cake that day. But Chris, I think.
Yeah, but I'm willing to do it next time, though. I'll get fat on all of it next time.
They've got popcorn carts. I think they need to do funnel cake carts. Yes. Funnel cake from each country, their own take on it. We'll see. I don't know if it'll take off or not. But,
are you an Imagineer? Because if not, you need to send that idea in and maybe get paid for it.
Disney, just send me a check.
Yeah, there you go.
You can just leave it blank. I'll fill it in. I'll tell you what my thoughts are worth. But
right.
But I do want to get to this week's segment of plussing, because I think we've got something that ties into the American Pavilion pretty well.
Yeah, agreed.
Plussing. So, Chris, you brought this up. Over on Disney Plus, you can watch National Geographic's series on the national parks.
Yep. It's an 8-episode series on the America's national parks, again by Nat Geo, like you're saying. But each episode is about 44 minutes long. So, if you're watching that on TV with commercials and stuff, it's an hour show. But yeah, they go through 8 of our national parks, and just all over the place. You were describing them as you've watched them as going through all the seasons. And so just National Geographic always knocks it out of the park with the beauty and the storylines of watching nature and just seeing how everything unfolds. So that's a great way to experience America. And it came out in 2015, which you'll see in the description on Disney Plus that says it celebrates the 100th year of America's best idea. I can't remember exactly who, but someone like Theodore Roosevelt or someone like that said that our national park system is America's best idea. And so to celebrate 100 years of national parks, National Geographic came out with that series, and such a beautiful series.
Well, we've talked about some of the other documentary series, especially Wild Russia. I think when we were in Canada, talked about Russia just being kind of at the same type of climate, but just the beauty of nature. I really liked this series for that, going through all 4 seasons, seeing those in the park, and kind of seeing the life cycle of a lot of the wildlife in the national parks. I love getting to national parks anytime I can. Gotten to drive through a couple on our trips across the country, and love every time that I can visit those. But what a great tie-in to the American Pavilion, American Adventure Pavilion, for this week's plussing. Chris,
you know what's great about that too is that because National Geographic now falls under the Disney banner, is that when we look at the grown-up side of Disney, that we can, I love a good documentary. I love something that shows nature like that. And so that is also under the Disney banner, as much as, watching a Marvel movie or watching the latest Disney Pixar movie as well. So I love how diverse, how broad you can go in the Disney world. And again, like we often say, it's not just about Disney princesses. It's so much more when it comes down to what anyone of any age can explore and enjoy.
Absolutely. I really love the American Pavilion just because it represents my history, of just being an American. But it does feel like home as we're going around. It's like we're world travelers. We get to come home for a few minutes, and then we're back on our world travels again. Excited about next week's episode, which will be Italy,
Yes.
a country that I actually have visited and do love. So excited to visit Italy around World Showcase next week. Be sure to follow us on social media at The Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Find us on YouTube. Go to our website, themouseandmen.com, to get our top 10 things in Walt Disney World for grown-ups to do. Just a little cheat sheet to help you through, whether you're taking your family down there or you just find yourself in Orlando. You want something to do. Disney's there. I feel like I got to go. These are some ideas that we had that we think you'll enjoy. But I think all we can say now is don't grow up too much.
Keep exploring, everybody.
Exactly.